So it would appear on the face of it that not only was Angela Rayner trying to take credit for an initiative that their government did not set up, but it's actually been closed by their government and not carried on. It absolutely boggles the mind how this government cannot see that this budget has absolutely destroyed the economy as we grow ever dangerously close to a recession in the UK coming up to this Christmas. And not only is the writing on the wall, but the statistics are on the wall, and it's absolutely plain. And so that I'll discuss in this video, along with members of this government trying to take credit for Conservative initiatives, whilst ironically scrapping the initiative that they're taking credit for. More about that a bit later. And as a purely legal aspect, some people have observed that, well, it appears that the High Court has taken an Islamic ruling of a council into account in one of its decisions. And so I'll explain what's going on there as well towards the end of the video. So do stick around. But if you are new to me, I'm Daniel Smith, a barrister of England and Wales, and I'm currently wearing a Christmas sweater because we are coming up to Christmas. So please do subscribe if for that only. And I love to explain law to you and what's going on in the world right now. So let's take a look here, shall we? These statistics, as I said, the writing is not just on the wall, the statistics are on the wall. A couple of Telegraph articles here. In fact, there could not be more stark a contrast of these two articles, looking at articles from the Telegraph, comparing these two here. The previous one from May, economy going gangbusters. Yes, I know it's an Americanism, but it means that it's unexpected growth. Britain's been turned around, escapes recession, and very fantastic growth at that time. Compared with now, we're on the brink of recession. And so right now we are looking at this potential recession. And as I say, the writing is not just there. They're not just being told by lots of different people, business people, that these decisions do not make economic sense. They do not make business sense. You do not grow a business by stinging the business with additional costs and burdening that business with additional costs. And if they want to take on additional staff, by having extra costs of taking on those staff. In fact, it was Rachel Reeves herself was saying in a previous statement in Parliament that hitting businesses with these additional costs is making it more difficult for businesses to take people on and more difficult to grow. And in her own words, she must understand it, that that is not the way to help a business grow. And so I don't understand why there's this disconnect, unless there's a lot more going on than we really know. But looking down at some of these statistics here, you can see from earlier on in the year, we had fantastic growth, but then Labour wins power, and it's actually, if you look further down here, flatlined in quarter three with the revision for December, right down to zero. And with inflation up and growth down, we are desperately looking towards a potential recession here. Not only that, if we compare ourselves with other jurisdictions, the United States, France, Japan, Canada, Germany, we are right down at the bottom. Italy, sadly, not doing very well either, but falling behind. But despite having been growing at the fastest rate in the G7 at the start of the year, now having flatlined. But as I said, the writing is firmly on the wall, because we have large recruitment companies making this absolutely clear. In their words, hiring just came to a halt in November. Adding that part-time workers and low-paid jobs will be hit the hardest by the national insurance increases. The numbers are very similar to a recessionary period. I know we're not in a recessionary period, they say, but from a hiring perspective, we are. And so straight from the horse's mouth, straight from one of the biggest recruiters, they are saying that hiring just came to a halt in November. And it's no surprise following the hit to businesses for the cost of hiring. So I really implore those that are in power to take a close look at this. There's no shame in going back. In fact, it is one of the most humble things anyone can do, and go back and say, actually, we might have got that wrong. It was a nice idea, but it didn't work. But as with any experience that I've ever had with local authorities going back over many years, and this includes anything to do with roads, it includes things to do with planning, it includes things to do with the family arrangements and where the local authorities get involved in family cases. And I've ended up in the family courts. I did a large chunk of my early practice in the family courts, and I've had situations where local authorities have been absolutely hell-bent on removing children from then was the maternal grandmother. This is a segue by way of example. They were absolutely hell-bent on removing these children from the maternal grandmother, and we got to court, and there was probably 4 or 5 barristers there by the point, because I was for one party, another barrister for another party. Each of the children had their own guardians and solicitors and barristers, and so there's a whole group of us in court. And it got to the point where the judge looked at it and said, I cannot see any reason to remove these children from the grandmother. She was perfectly able and capable of taking care of these children. It absolutely made sense because she could facilitate contact with each of the parents in a safe environment and everything else. The maternal grandmother was absolutely no threat whatsoever, but for some reason they had it, the local authority had it in mind to remove those children and place them into care, because that was the original plan. You see, that from taking them away from the mother, it was the original plan to place them into care, and so instead they went to grandmother, and we ended up in this spiral. Suffice to say, that case ended with the grandmother having the children, with the long-term plan for them going back to the mother if that was suitable. My point for that little segue story is that once local authorities and government bodies get these plans in motion and they've set something about, they generally don't go back on those things. It's like many areas around the country have replaced recycling bins with those stupid little bags that you're supposed to fold cardboard and cut cardboard up and put them in those bags. This system doesn't work. Now we see cardboard strewn all over the streets everywhere, whereas before it was secure in a bin and it wasn't messing up the streets everywhere. But the local authorities just don't tend to go back on those decisions when they realise they don't work. But there is nothing more humble than admitting that something was wrong. Now, as an aside, with everything going on in the news just lately, you might be tempted to air and vent your frustrations online in the form of comments somewhere. Now, whilst I recommend that you think about what you post before you post it, if you are worried about what you post and where you post it, I can only recommend that you try to remain anonymous. One of the best ways of doing that is with a partner to my channel, which is NordVPN, a virtual private network, which will mask your real IP address and conceal where you are, and they don't keep any logs and tracks of what you are doing online. You'll see from the top of the page here that my status shows as protected, meaning that the IP address is not my real IP address. It doesn't give away my location, and everything is filtered through this VPN and masks what you do. They do not keep any logs, and your browsing online is perfectly safe. They have over 7,000 servers worldwide, and you can connect on each of your devices at the simple click of a button. You download, you install, and you simply click connect, which will appear in the top right hand side here, and immediately connects you to a server in your immediate location. If you want to optimize for speed, that's fine. You just click speed and it will select the best server in your location for fast internet access. You can also store your passwords, you can store files securely, and it even has a system in place to scan websites and downloads to protect you from malicious software and websites. Of course, as a partner to my channel, you get a fantastic discount, which includes 4 months extra free and a money-back guarantee if you change your mind. Just use the code BBB, which is the nickname you gave me, linked in the description below, and for less than the price of a cup of coffee every month, you will not regret the peace of mind that you get knowing that you are that little bit safer online when you do air your frustrations, which I can quite understand. So do check out NordVPN for that peace of mind. But when it comes to these sort of decisions, sometimes they are even taking credit for other people's work. Now, here's something I had to look up because I saw this post here from Angela Rayner, and I thought to myself, well, hang on, something about this doesn't seem quite right. So she posts, Labour are delivering on a plan for change by saving vital community assets right across the country. These cherished community pubs, centres and sports clubs represent what is so special about communities across the UK, and Labour are backing them, she says. So, as I said, something about that didn't strike me quite right, first of all. So I looked into it, and it seemed to me that there was a bunch of funding available that they were putting into local community centres and pubs and things like that. Community assets, they refer to them. And then it sprung about that actually this appears to me to be the remnants of what was originally the Community Ownership Fund which was established under the Conservatives by and spearheaded, as it seems, by Robert Jenrick at the time, when they launched £150 million worth of this community ownership fund, which would indeed help local groups to take over pubs, theatres, etc. But that appears to have been canned, to coin a phrase, by Labour, and this appears to be the money that's left over from that, because Grok has been very helpful in summarising what happened here. I said, can you find a comprehensive chronology of the community ownership fund? And yeah, sure, it comes back, and with references to government articles and things like that. It even found some tweets that people had criticised Angela Rayner for exactly what I did just now, even before I found those tweets. Come back to those in just a second. But it shows here with authoritative references to the government websites. So March 2021, this fund was announced, described as £150 million of fund to help community groups buy and take over local community assets at risk of being lost. The first bidding opened in July. That round closed in August. The round 1 was reopened for a limited period in December. The prospectus for round 2 was launched in May 22. The rules were changed, new prospectus for round 3, an evaluation of the methodology, and then in March 2024, round 4 was released, but that was put on hold because of the general election. Now, in September, there was an update on the status of the scheme was published, indicating that the new administration had not made an announcement on reopening the fund and was expected after the government spending review in October 2024. So it would appear on the face of it that not only was Angela Rayner trying to take credit for an initiative that their government did not set up, but it's actually been closed by their government and not carried on. And so the gloating that she was doing was with the leftover money, on the face of it, from that fund that was set up under Conservatives. Mark Jenkinson says, worth noting that this terrible government still can't get its affairs in order. They've cancelled the Community Ownership Fund entirely today, yet groups can still submit applications. So these groups can still submit applications for the money, but they've ended the fund on the face of it. And so I find that utterly bizarre. So make of that what you will, but let me know in the comments what you think about that as well. But coming to the final point, it's actually a very sad case, this one. But I do want to address it because I think this will create a lot of conversation and, with respect, some misguided understanding. And this, in essence, this was a High Court case regarding the continuation or termination of life support for a young child. Now, the reason that this appears to have come to the forefront of discussion on social media, which is also the reason I want to address it, is that the High Court cited a fatwa in its judgment, a fatwa being a legal opinion from an authored expert from the Muslim Council of Europe. And in essence, this, together with written representations from the Bangladesh High Commissioner, this was cited in this judgment. Now, there's been reference on social media. I've seen various discussions where people now understood this to mean that the High Court has been swayed by this decision and perhaps believe that it ought not to have been. But that's not entirely the case. Now, it is entirely normal and routine, in fact, for the court to reference evidence that has been filed and to either just acknowledge it, reference how it's been relied upon or considered, or not at all. And so in this case, the court has merely referenced that this evidence has been filed, and at least in reference to the comments by the High Commissioner, the judge said, "I've not held it necessary to investigate these matters further or place reliance on them in reaching my decision." And so whilst referencing the fatwa, the court hasn't really relied upon it. But the main point of this fatwa, the legal opinion, and the representations from the Bangladesh High Commissioner was essentially this, that the thrust of the representations is that any Bangladeshi national, including doctors who consented to or participated in the withdrawal of treatment from a child, would be guilty of a criminal offence under the law of Bangladesh and liable to prosecution in the jurisdiction. That was essentially the argument made. So the reason that this was cited was that that represented the position and the views of people involved, and the court sought it necessary just to reference that this was filed in evidence in going through its judgment. But ultimately the court did and always will place the child's best interests at the heart of its decision. And if you scroll back up, and I'll try to remember to link the judgment in the description below, you'll see that all of this falls under the heading of submissions. So in these judgments, the judge will very often recite and reference the evidence that has been filed, the position of the parties. It doesn't mean that that is how the judge has reached the decision. It just means this is the evidence that's been filed, these are the arguments of the parties, this is everything that they say, and then we'll go through how it reached its conclusions. You'll then see that there's another heading under the law, in which the judge will go through all of the relevant legislation, both in the UK, the EU, various cases that have discussed similar issues and how they might apply or contrast to the current case. You'll then see a heading of discussion, under which the judge will discuss all of the facts of the case in detail in reference with the law involved and coming to those conclusions, but perhaps not yet drawing those full conclusions, which will come a little bit later. One of the subheadings is best interests. This is obviously the best interests of the child. The judge said within the foregoing medical context, it's plain that there are substantial factors in the case that tend to support the case made by the trust. That it is not in the child's best interest for life-sustaining treatment to continue. However, in this case, I'm also satisfied that there are compelling factors on the opposite side of the balance to argue against the best interest declaration sought by the trust in respect of the child's medical care. On balance, I'm satisfied that the latter prevail over the former. Now, further down in the judgment, the judge did reference the fatwa, but only because it's a piece of evidence filed by the parties. And in referencing that, the judge said as follows: turning to the principle of the sanctity of life, the parents have, understandably, placed emphasis on the contents of the fatwa secured from the Muslim Council of Europe. Within the context of these proceedings, however, the fatwa is simply a valuable restatement of the sanctity of life, a sanctity recognised by all the great religions and also by those who view life through a secular or scientific prism. The sanctity of life is fundamental, indeed sacred, principle from which there flows strong presumption in favour of a course of action that will prolong life. Within this context, Tafida's life has inherent value. It is also of value, the judge said, to Tafida herself. It is precious to her parents, sibling and family, and even now it adds in whatever small and incomplete way to the body of collective human experience. Tafida is profoundly disabled, but a life of disability is of equal value to all other lives. And finally, I want to jump back to paragraph 2 of this judgment, part of the introduction, which is the preface with which everybody should read this entire judgment, and it reads as follows. The court must and does disregard the urging of media and social media campaigns, petitions and pressure groups, and the views of informed and uninformed commentators and opinion writers. The court does so not because the views and opinions of those diverse constituencies are in any way unwelcome or invalid, but rather because the decisions of the High Court in these most challenging of cases are determined solely by application of the law in order to reach a decision on the seminal question of best interests. And so I would indeed urge anyone to read the judgment in full if you were to draw any thoughts and conclusions about it. So I hope in some way that was useful. I will link the judgment in the description below. It is a rather long and sad judgment, almost 200 paragraphs long, but it does set a much fuller context than you might otherwise hear. But either way, I hope you found this video somewhat useful, interesting. Please do like the video and subscribe. That does help me on my goal of 1 million subscribers. And as always, thank you for watching.